Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to your favorite news destination. You're watching In Your Interest with me, Kabir Naqvi. And on the top of the segment, let's take you to a cracked up Shimla, where families in Chalaunthi are still concerned and shaken up by those cracks in the residential buildings due to a tunnel blasting. Well, this is a major incident that we continue to track from Chalaunthi in Shimla, where residents were forced to evacuate their homes late at night this past Friday after large cracks appeared in a 6-story building. And the damage is believed to have been caused by blasting during the construction of a 4-lane tunnel. The affected, of course, include locals and tourists, many of whom that were staying in the area and had to leave immediately in the freezing cold. The sudden evacuation of at least 15 families after the alarming cracks that appeared left residents panicked and uncertain. District authorities quickly arranged for shelter and food at a Zilla Parishad building, whilst a committee, it has been formed to assess damages and recommendations for compensations that are going to continue. Residents have reported that minor cracks had appeared 3 days ago, but no action was taken by the construction company or the local authorities over there, even after repeated complaints. A local woman said her life savings are all at risk, expressing concern for her future at large.
इनकी ही लापरवाही की वजह से सब कुछ, और इनको हमने सूचित भी किया था, लेकिन इन्होंने कोई एक्शन नहीं लिया। कल हमको देखने आए थे, लेकिन इन्होंने यही कहा कि कोई खतरा नहीं, कोई भी खतरा नहीं, आप यहाँ आराम से रह सकते हो। और शाम को 8 बजे के करीब कॉल आती है कि आप सारे बाहर आ जाओ, किराएदार भी और सब लोग बाहर आके खड़े हो जाओ जिस रोड पे।
That's a dichotomy in those two statements, different versions that were coming out. Panchayati Raj Minister Anirudh Singh, he visited the site, met the affected families and assured them of all the possible help. He also instructed the NHAI to provide immediate compensation. The minister said that he has long raised concerns about the 4-lane project with the Union Minister Nitin Gadkari. He also noted that cracks have appeared on the Sanjauli-Dhali bypass, which has been closed for traffic as well.
1.5 साल से जो है नेशनल हाईवे अथॉरिटी ऑफ इंडिया को बोल रहा हूँ, गडकरी जी को भी बोला है, उसमें संज्ञान भी लिया है। और इसी के तर्ज पे जो है कमेटीज़ बनी हैं, जो इनका एक्वायर्ड एरिया है उससे बाहर कोई नुकसान होता है उसके लिए कमेटीज़ ऑलरेडी बन चुकी है। न केवल हिमाचल प्रदेश में अपितु जम्मू कश्मीर और उत्तरांचल में भी इसी के तर्ज पे बनी है। इसी को देखते हुए जो नुकसान है वो तो कोई किसी बिल्डिंग में क्रैक आया है, आपने देखा है, और वो कभी भी जो है वो गिर सकते हैं, क्योंकि न केवल बिल्डिंग में क्रैक आया, ऊपर पीडब्ल्यूडी की जो रोड है, बाईपास है, उसमें उसके अंदर भी कितने बड़े बड़े क्रैक आ गए हैं, आप देख रहे हैं। इसको सबसे पहला प्राथमिकता जो है लोगों की जान बचाने का है, किसी को जान की हानि ना हो। दूसरा, उनको फेयर कंपनसेशन मिले और समय पे मिले, यानी कि 2-2 साल लगे, 3-3 साल लगे, तो उसकी प्रक्रिया जो है नेशनल हाईवे अथॉरिटी ने चालू कर दी है।
Well, the Deputy Commissioner of Shimla, Anupam Kashyap, has set up a committee headed by the Sub-Divisional Magistrate to investigate the damage. And the State Geologist is preparing a detailed report on the causes. The administration says it acted immediately to evacuate affected houses and is providing all possible assistance. Currently, 4-lane construction has been completely halted.
हमारे सारी पूरी टीम जैसी सूचना मिली थी, उसके बाद कल शाम से यहाँ थे वरिष्ठ पुलिस अधिकारी, एडीएम साहब, एसडीएम साहब और एडिशनल एसपी वगैरह, और सारा मैं एसपी साहब ने खुद मॉनिटर किया इन सारी चीज़ों को। लेकिन मसला थोड़ा लॉन्ग टर्म प्लानिंग से रिलेटेड मसला है। इस तरह की दीवारों में कई जगह दरारें देखी गई हैं और आसपास के कई घरों में दीवारें आई हैं जो दिख रही है, विजिबल है, हमने भी देखा। और 5 घर तो जो है उसमें काफ़ी ज़्यादा प्रभावित है। सड़क से ऊपर भी कुछ भाग में जो है वो कई दरारें जो है वो हल्की हल्की देखी गई हैं। और तो इसके बारे में जो है एक डिटेल में अभी हमने रिक्वेस्ट कर लिया है डायरेक्टर इंडस्ट्रीज से, और वो एक अपनी टीम जो है वो जियोलॉजी की जो टीम होती है उसको भी यहाँ भेज रहे हैं।
Well, the authorities maintain that the damage was reported near an under-construction tunnel and a 4-lane national highway project being executed by the NHAI. Families living in the area had expressed apprehensions that excavations and blasting work could further destabilize the hillside, prompting demands for immediate inspections, rehabilitation measures and suspension of blasting in residential zones. And for now, local concerns remain high, especially among shopkeepers and hotel owners, fearing economic losses. Whilst the controlled blasting continues under strict instructions, residents are anxious about their future. To speak more on this and understand what the way forward looks like, Vimlendu Jha, environmentalist and expert, joins us here on the broadcast. Mr. Jha, help us understand. We've seen cracking buildings and evacuations before as well. About 16 months back, it was Joshimath that was in question. Do you see this as an isolated event in Shimla, or this is part of a larger pattern that we see where we're looking at aggressive infrastructural projects in fragile zones and we're not really taking into account all of that?
So I think it's very important for us to understand that this is not an isolated event, because in the last couple of years, we've actually seen many such instances of disaster, and this, therefore, I will not call this an accident, but I'll call this a systemic failure where we do not understand what Himalayas needs or what's the requirement of Himalayas. Of course, it's very, very convenient for us to a lot of times call this a development versus environment debate, because it's very, very distracting. Nobody's against development, but what kind of a development should be actually be had in the Himalayas, something which actually goes with the carrying capacity of the Himalayas. So what we've seen in Barkot, in Silkyara, the tunnel collapse that we had, the Joshimath sinking, and these incidences, and not just this, as in if you look at for almost 4 months, the news that we actually had in terms of cracking, in terms of landslides, in terms of cloudburst and everything else. And right now we are only in January, and I can assure you that by the time in May and June, you and I would be doing stories almost every day of the repercussions of similar disasters. So the crack is only symbolic of a systemic neglect when we do not really pay attribute to science. We all know, everyone knows that the geology of Himalayas is very, very different from the geology of perhaps Gurgaon or anywhere else. So when you construct a 4-lane or an 8-lane highway in Gurgaon or in Jaipur or in Hyderabad, it has to be very, very different from the kind of road construction that you actually conduct in Shimla or in Uttarkashi or in many other areas. So, short answer to your question is that this is not an isolated event. This is amnesia that we are suffering with, where we tend to conveniently forget what we've actually faced last year, last year, or perhaps in last 1 decade, in terms of really looking at our development, a greed to look at how do we actually capture and make our life convenient in the Himalayas, only for the outsiders. Largely, this is done in the name of locals, that locals perhaps will have a greater access to healthcare and hospital and school and
well, the locals weren't heard, Mr. Jha. Development
Absolutely.
versus environment. I mean, I don't know how prudent that debate even is in today's time. We're learning about the coral reefs that are never going to come back again. But focusing back on the geology of the Himalayan region, residents say that the cracks appeared days ago. From an environmental governance point of view, how often are these blasting norms, the geological assessments that are carried out, these safety buffers, are they actually enforced on the ground? Or it's just hearsay?
And the reason is that, if there was a scientific study done in terms of understanding the soil type, the rock type, the geology of this area, this kind of a construction project or widening of a road project will not be allowed. If you look at most of these road projects, they do not actually follow the basic science of sloping. They also, when you are actually blasting in terms of what kind of a blast, and we've seen, and the great example that we have of, just perhaps a few hundred kilometers away was the great tunnel collapse, where there were dozens of workers who were actually trapped, and that actually happened. So there are almost 66 such tunnels that's actually been constructed in this entire, not just in Himachal, but also in Uttaranchal. And we've seen that from, say, Leh to Sikkim, to Arunachal, similar kind of a development project is actually undertaken by the government. And a lot of times this happens in the name of national security in terms of creating access roads for our security forces to reach the borderline. But it's important for us. National security is important, but what kind of a national security where you have cracks, when you have cities sinking, when you have tunnels collapsing,
right?
And not just that, also the insecurity. This national security is one thing, but resource insecurity that it brings. Like, imagine the Himalayas is not just rocks assembled together. Your water, your weather shield, imagine almost 500 million people actually depend directly on the river bodies that actually come out of the Himalayas. And I'm not even talking about people and their own local aquifers and their local ecology that is getting disturbed. So it's very, very dangerous. The unfortunate part is that we are not learning. Our entire governance system has become so reactive that rather than proactive, we are actually right now shutting down a particular tunnel construction, this particular road construction. But are we jumping into really evaluating why is this happening? Why are such road projects being undertaken
Right, those are
without
all
any
credible
scientific
points, Mr.
study?
Jha. The reels that go viral on social media show a different part before the Atal Tunnel and a completely different worldview from the other side of Atal Tunnel. I'm just worried how soon all of this development in the name of the locals is going to start hampering on the other side of Atal Tunnel. So when we're talking about immediate safeguards, what are those that the government, agencies like the NHAI should implement and prevent such incidents? Should blasting be completely banned near residential zones? I mean, some sort of development has to give way. 4-lane projects, they're being pushed across the Himalayas in the name of locals, like you said. But what will give? What should be the way forward?
So I don't think we need band-aid and short-term analysis of this problem. As in, again, as I said, it will be reactive if we think of this as an isolated event and we would only fix our issues with regard to this crack. The crack is not in only Shimla. The crack is in entire Himalayas, and we will have to, in the long term and the medium term, look at the entire landscape and the way we're looking at exploitation of Himalayas. And of course, a lot of, as you rightly said, that a lot of that happens in the name of locals, but there's no consultation, there's no ground up. So very, very important that rather than making it top down, rather than making it infrastructure heavy, rather than following a template which is place agnostic, we will have to look at something which is appropriate for Himalayas. Nobody is agnostic or nobody is against development. As I told you, that it's very, very convenient and distracting for people to say that these are anti-developmentalists. We are not anti-developmentalists. We're saying development at what cost, what sort of development which is appropriate to a particular geology.
And that's a natural question to ask.
Of Himalayas.
That's a natural question to ask. I think we're going to leave it there. The exact same statement that you made, Mr. Jha. This is not a crack just in Shimla. This is a crack across all of the Himalayas, across our geological understanding, and of course the regulation failures that we're seeing time and again. Time for us to go back to the drawing board, and of course I know it's easier said than done. On that note, environmentalist Vimlendu Jha, many thanks for speaking to News 9 once again. All right then, shifting our focus here to another important story that we're tracking. This time it's about space exploration and of course what kind of a horse India has created with the PSLV, because India's space agency ISRO has suffered a setback after its PSLV C-62 carrying 16 satellites that encountered an anomaly, signaling the failure of the entire mission. All of those satellites now lost in space. What does that mean? The rocket, which lifted off from Sriharikota at about 10:18 a.m., was carrying 16 satellites, including a foreign Earth observation satellite. And whilst the initial phases of the launch went on as planned, problems were reported during the third stage of this flight. ISRO chairman V. Narayanan, he said that disturbances were observed when the strap-on motors were providing the thrust, leading to a deviation from the intended flight path, which means it essentially did not land in its actual orbit plan. As a result, the rocket missed its target orbit, and the mission to place the satellites into space could not be completed. ISRO later confirmed that the anomaly occurred towards the end of the third stage, and a detailed analysis has been initiated to identify the cause of the failure. Sources have said, they've spoken to PTI, that all 16 satellites were lost, marking the second consecutive failure of a PSLV mission during the third stage. Again, a similarity in both those setbacks, which took place in May last year. Addressing the media, Narayanan said ISRO is analyzing all kinds of data from all ground stations and will share further details once the investigation is complete. To understand what this lost in space essentially means, Group Captain V.N. Jha is with us on the broadcast, former Joint Director DRDO and an aerospace expert. Always a pleasure to have you with us, Group Captain. Group Captain, ISRO sources, they've told PTI all 16 satellites are lost. In practical aerospace terms, what does this essentially mean? What does lost in space mean here? Are the satellites destroyed? Are they drifting unconditionally? Or are they simply unreachable in the wrong orbit? What's really happening?
Abir, very good evening to you and all your viewers. I'm slightly sad at the core of my heart that this is one of the failures. Although in the R&D, we never say it is a failure. It is always a learning phase.
Yep.
But this particular satellite has been a workforce of the ISRO. It is not under the R&D. It's the proven product which has been serving the Indian interest and the world interest actually.
Yep.
for n number of times. So
the Nisar
it is
satellite was put up there on the same PSLV. We spoke about it.
absolutely, and this is the something which is happening, which has recurred. Previous one also the failure on the part of the third stage. This time also it is a failure on the third stage. But these two are the different. I was just trying to analyze what had happened in the C61 and what has happened in the C62. There's a miles of difference. There's a plethora of difference between the two. Of course, the ISRO will be reading everything of that. But remember, whenever we do anything of the R&D, make a product, we carry out two important things. One is the FMCA, in which we look at the every systems, every critical failure that can happen, and why it happens, how it is being resolved in that particular technology that we have gone through. Now, ISRO will have to go to the drawing board that after the half period of the ignition of the third stage, what are all those critical factors which can make such things? In the 61, we had seen that the ignition had failed. The rocket had extinguished. And then
Third
thereafter,
stage, right? Group captain, that was still third stage.
yeah, that was third stage.
So there is
And
a pattern here. There is a pattern here. They might be different, but there is a slight pattern at play.
Well, what I could see, with my naked eye and sitting hundreds of kilometers away, the rocket was making a merry-go-round in the space. Now, even if for 2 seconds or 3 seconds, it puts the thrust into the opposite direction, then the final velocity, final relative velocity of this rocket at that juncture is entirely different from the previous rocket, which was going in the same plane, and then it failed. So we had suggested that in the fourth stage, separation of third and fourth stage, now that these rockets are having additional fuel with which ISRO tries to bring back the final stage motor back to the Earth or back to the atmosphere with the assisted burn. So that much of additional fuel is with you. So in case if you can separate out the failed stage 3, separate it out. If the stage 3 has failed, separate it out. Velocity, by and large, you have already achieved whatever stage 3 had to give you. And
Right.
then start with the fourth stage and continue with your thing. You may be able to, get the entire the velocity and the altitude. This is what is the crux. No, rocket doesn't know which satellite you are carrying. It doesn't know that. It only knows the physics, whether the altitude and the
With
velocity
16
factor.
satellites, group captain, was the load a little bit too much? I mean, an Uber that's meant for 5 people, suddenly you fit in 8 people in that Uber. It's not going to drive nicely.
No, Kabir. That is not the reason. The payload, the weight of the payload, mass of the payload must happen within the acceptable range.
Okay.
That is how the entire thing has
You know
gone.
what I personally feel?
But-
Okay, point taken, group captain. I think this is not going to, hurt the credibility of ISRO. These are just two setbacks. These are back to back. And
I
you
think
rightly pointed out that this is more data for us to understand. Before we let you go, group captain, tell the viewers what is happening with those 16 satellites. Are they gone forever? Are we not getting them back? Are they drifting uncontrollably? What's happening there?
Look, there was a bit of, paucity in the information that came. At one screen of the ISRO, we saw that the PS3, stage 3 has been separated and stage 4 has ignited. This is what we saw in one of the frames. But the last valuable data that I had was at 390.5 seconds when the velocity was 5.8 kilometers per second and the altitude was 340 kilometers. At that, in case if the satellite is lost, if the fourth stage ignition has happened, then I don't know. Then ISRO has to go into the details because that telemetric data has not come. That we have not seen. That only ISRO will know. So if the fourth stage has ignited, and if it has taken the complete duration of that, then the satellite will be somewhere safe right now. It might not have, ejected or it might not have injected into the orbit, but the satellite at that altitude will be safe enough.
So not just Not
with the
just lost in
velocity,
space,
just
lost in data over there as well. But you're telling us that it might be a possibility that those satellites are safe. My concern was, hey, let them not come back into the atmosphere and fall, at a random spot elsewhere. And
that is
hopefully,
where
if
I
they
was
do,
coming to.
yeah,
That is
hopefully,
where
if
I
they
was
do,
coming to, and I wanted to give you an example.
yeah,
One of the SpaceX rocket that carried 64 satellites last year, and all those 64 satellites fell down to the Earth. And you know for what reason? The velocity that was supposed to be 7.6 kilometers per
yeah,
second,
yeah, yeah.
the achieved velocity was just about 7.4. And for that reason, all those satellites fell down.
Well, let's hope
SpaceX
for the
didn't
best.
prepare
Let's
it.
hope for the best, Group Captain. And in the coming days, let's hope for more data. But all in all, this is not going to be a setback for the launch credibility of ISRO. These are just two setbacks, and we've only
No,
learned. We've only gotten better.
There's one thing through your media I would like ISRO to know.
All right.
One thing I told you that FMCA has to be gone. You go to the table where you have that FMCA, see what are those possibilities. And second, it is a proven satellite, not under R&D, and the same third stage is going to the failure again. Look at the people who are handling the QA. That is a very strong possibility. And third, last, I am from the armed forces, but both these PSLVs were carrying army project. It was, satellite, Earth observation satellite 9 was meant for the armed forces. And this particular satellite was N1 was also meant for the armed forces.
All
These
right.
two have gone through. So also please have any possible, I will not like to call it sabotage, but then any
But look
possible,
into it. You're saying national security is one angle that needs to be assessed over there as well. All right, then. Group Captain, always a pleasure to speak with you. And many thanks for helping us understand where this is. Let's hope for good sense to prevail and that data can help us understand what really went awry next time around. Many thanks, Group Captain. All right, then, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to slip into a quick commercial breather here. Top stories light on the other side. Don't go anywhere.
हम लोग शंघाई या सिंगापुर होने की बात क्यों करें, लोग मुंबई बनाने की बात करें, इस प्रकार का मुंबई तैयार करते हैं। अभी देखिए मुंबई का जो ट्रैफिक है, 60% ऑफ मुंबई मूव्स ऑन वेस्टर्न एक्सप्रेसवे। इन नेक्स्ट 5 to 7 years वी आर गोइंग टू ट्रांसफॉर्म मुंबई। भाईंदर से लेकर तो विरार तक एक 24 किलोमीटर सी ब्रिज को मान्यता दी है। थाने से बोरीवली के टनल का काम हमने शुरू किया है। आने वाले 5 वर्षों में देश में सबसे ज्यादा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर अगर कहीं तैयार हो रहा है तो महाराष्ट्र में और एमएमआर रीजन में हो। मुंबई में अभी जो हुआ है ये तो सिर्फ ट्रेलर है, पिक्चर अभी बाकी है।
लूजर।
लाइफ हो या इन्वेस्टिंग, ओवर कॉन्फिडेंस से नुकसान भी हो सकता है। म्यूचुअल फंड अपनाओ और थोड़ी हेवी लिफ्टिंग एक्सपर्ट्स को भी करने दो।
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार जोखिमों के अधीन है। योजना से संबंधित सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें।
भारत की सबसे बड़ी गोल्ड लोन एनबीएफसी मुथूट फाइनेंस से गोल्ड लोन लीजिए और फिर देखिए सोना क्या नहीं कर सकता। कॉल कीजिए 1-800-313-1212।
Welcome back. Thanks for staying within your interest. This next story about homes that have been completed but dreams that have been left abandoned. What was meant to be a symbol of hope has today become a story of deep neglect and anger in Kodagu. While there was urgency in rehabilitating homeless people in Bengaluru's Kogilu area, the same urgency has been shockingly missing when it comes to Kodagu's flood-hit families. At Jambur village in Somwarpet Taluk, 200 houses built free of cost by the Infosys Foundation remain locked, abandoned and unused, even 3 years after construction has been completed. These houses were built for families who lost everything in the devastating Kodagu floods. Yet, even today, more than 300 affected families are struggling without permanent shelter, forced to live in uncertainty. Infosys reportedly spent about 25 crore rupees on this project, nearly 10 lakh rupees per house, with the aim of giving displaced families a new beginning. Sudha Murthy herself visited Kodagu, held meetings with the district administration and closely monitored this entire project. But instead of becoming homes, these houses have allegedly turned into hideouts for miscreants and rowdies, raising serious safety concerns for the locals in the vicinity. Residents say this delay is not just negligence, it is a direct insult to the humanitarian effort made by the Infosys Foundation. There is now severe public anger against the Kodagu district administration, with questions being raised on why houses meant for flood victims are being left to rot. Why were the beneficiaries not identified on time? And who is responsible exactly for this delay? Well, these are questions the administration must answer, and News9 continues to ask them. Why are flood victims still homeless when houses have been ready, construction completed 3 years back? For the people of Kodagu, this is not just about houses, it's about dignity, it's about trust, and needless to say, justice delayed.
ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ತುಂಬಾ ಕಷ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಈ ಕಡೆ ಗರ್ವಾಲೆ, ಶಿರಂಗಳ್ಳಿ, ಮೋತೊಕ್ಲು ಈ ಕಡೆ ಸೈಡಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬಾ ಜನರಿಗೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಮನೆ ಕಳ್ಕೊಂಡವರಿಗೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ಬೆಟ್ಟಗುಡ್ಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಮನೆಗಳು ಕಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಂಥ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋರಿಗೂ ಸಮೇತ ಅಲರ್ಟ್ ಆದ್ರೂ ಸಹ 3 ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ಡಿಲೇ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ. ಏನು ವಿಷಯ ಏನಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳ ಕೈವಾಡ ಇದೆ ಏನಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಕೈವಾಡ ಇದೆಯೇ ಏನಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ಈ ಥರ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ನಾವು ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಕಾಂಗ್ರೆಸ್ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಬಂದ ಮೇಲೆ ಆದ್ರೂ ಇದು ಮನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ, ಅದು ಸಮೇತ.
Well, my colleague Mohammad Wajiullah joins us live on the broadcast here. Waji, very quickly help us understand what the lay of the land essentially looks like in this particular case. Kogilu, Kodagu, two different situations. Seem like there's a similarity that could have played out, but not this time around. So in terms of the dignity of the people, where do the people stand? What is the district administration saying? And can we see another News9 impact on the cards?
Well, let's hope that happens after this news. But to give context to our viewers, Kogilu is a different issue that happened in Bengaluru, where houses were demolished, and now the government is saying that they will allow them in the Rajiv Gandhi Singh. But this is in Kodagu in the Madikeri district, and this happened in 2008 when landslide happened and flood happened. A lot of houses were destroyed, and in 2021 these houses were finished and handed over to the then Chief Minister. I think Kumar Swamy was the then Chief Minister at that point of time. It was handed over to the government at that point of time, and symbolically it was also handed over to the people who were supposed to be allotted these houses. But then they were not allowed to move in because some work was still left. And now it's been more than 3 years. They are still waiting to get these houses. And what we've learned is the illegal activities that are taking place in the house, because they're abandoned. They're just left like this with doors open. People are going inside, smoking, drinking, and doing a lot of illegal activities. Now it remains to be seen whether this government or the Rajiv Gandhi Housing Board will allow these houses, because there are still families who lost their houses in the 2018 tragedy and have been living in rented houses, have been living with different places. Will they be given these houses or not? I suppose after this story that we have done, let's see what action that the government takes and allots the houses to the people who actually need them.
Absolutely. Vaji, many thanks for joining us. Let's hope for good sense to prevail in this particular case as well, and for good news coming across from your bureau as well. Many thanks for joining us here. All right, then, before we wrap up this segment of In Your Interest, a quick legal development vis-a-vis the immunity that the Chief Election Commissioner enjoy. The Supreme Court has issued notice to the central government and the Election Commission of India on a petition challenging a law that grants what is being described as lifelong immunity from prosecution to the Chief Election Commissioner and the election commissioners. Hearing the matter, a bench led by Chief Justice Suryakant said that the court would closely examine the issue and issued notices to allow the centre and the Election Commission to place their response on record. The challenge is against provisions of the Chief Election Commissioner and Other Election Commissioners Act 2023. The petitioner has questioned the constitutional validity of the law, arguing that it gives sweeping and unprecedented protection to the CEC and the election commissioners by shielding them from both civil and criminal proceedings for life for acts done whilst they were in office. Senior counsel appearing for the petitioner told the court that even judges do not enjoy such blanket immunity and Parliament cannot grant protections that the framers of the Constitution themselves did not provide to other constitutional authorities. Apart from immunity, the petition has also challenged the new appointment process for election commissioners. Under the 2023 law, the selection panel includes the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition, and a Union Cabinet Minister nominated by the Prime Minister themselves, replacing the earlier role of the Chief Justice of India. The petitioner, Congress worker Jaya Thakur, has argued that removing the Chief Justice weakens institutional checks and undermines the independence of the Election Commission, giving excessive power to the executive. The issue is linked to the Supreme Court's March 2023 ruling, which had directed that appointments be made by a panel including the Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition, and the Chief Justice until Parliament framed a law. The centre later passed the 2023 Act during the winter session of the Parliament, drawing criticism from the opposition, needless to say. With notices now issued, the Supreme Court has signalled that it will examine key questions related to immunity, the appointments, and the independence of the Election Commission once the replies are finally filed. And with that, time for us to slip into a quick commercial breather here. Top developments, again, right on the other side.
हम लोग शंघाई या सिंगापुर होने की बात क्यों करें, लोग मुंबई बनाने की बात करें, इस प्रकार का मुंबई तैयार करना। अभी देखिए मुंबई का जो